The Praetorian Guard, Chapter 1. The Terran Military Academy stood like a sentinel on the horizon, its spires towering into the heavens, casting long, dramatic shadows that stretched over the rolling plains of Earth. The Academy, with its weathered stone walls and ironclad gates, had been the heart of Terran military tradition for millennia. Set in the ruins of what was once called the Pyrenees Mountains, it rose above a landscape scarred by time and war. The air was crisp with the scent of pine and steel, and the fading light of the sun bathed everything in a deep, warm gold, transitioning to crimson as dusk began its slow crawl across the sky. For John Steele, standing amidst the ranks of his fellow cadets, the Academy was more than a prestigious institution. It was the crucible that had forged him, molded him, and broken him countless times before finally allowing him to stand here, triumphant. He had spent years on this sacred ground, where the ghosts of warriors past seemed to walk beside them, reminding every cadet of the weight they carried, the legacy they were bound to uphold. Earth, scarred yet resilient, was not just his home, but the birthplace of humanity's dominion over the stars. And the Academy was the cradle of that power. John stood at rigid attention, his body immovable despite the emotional storm inside him. His back was straight, his eyes fixed ahead, yet he could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him like an iron fist. Rows upon rows of cadets, clad in their immaculate uniforms, stood alongside him on the grand parade ground. The sheer magnitude of the moment was overwhelming. Each of them had endured years of relentless training, pushing themselves to the very edge of human endurance, but today was different. Today, they stood not as cadets, but as soldiers, warriors forged in the fires of the Academy, ready to serve the Terran Dominion. The sprawling parade ground seemed to extend endlessly in all directions. It was lined by ancient statues of long-dead heroes, their stone faces frozen in expressions of stoic defiance. Above them, the Academy's towering structure seemed to glow in the last rays of the sun, its Gothic spires piercing the heavens, as if to challenge the very gods themselves. Every inch of this place was steeped in history, a monument to the struggles and triumphs of the Terran Dominion. Earth might have been battered and bruised by centuries of war, its surface reshaped by terraforming, but it remained the heart of the Empire, the cradle from which humanity had spread across the stars. John's eyes flickered briefly to the distant mountains, now shrouded in twilight. Once, they had been the mighty Pyrenees, a natural fortress in Earth's distant past. Now, they served as silent witnesses to the training of the Dominion's future protectors. But the Academy wasn't just about tradition. It was about survival. His chest swelled with a mix of pride and humility. He wasn't like the others, at least not anymore. John had achieved something only a rare few in the Academy's long history could claim. He graduated at the very top of his class, earning the highest honors the Academy could bestow. But that accolade, though prestigious, paled in comparison to what it meant. He had earned a place in the Praetorian Guard, the Emperor's elite, the guardians of humanity's last hope. The Praetorian Guard was a legend, its members whispered about in the hallowed halls of the Academy like gods among men. They were the finest soldiers in the entire galaxy, chosen not just for their strength and skill, but for their loyalty, their unbreakable will, and their devotion to the Emperor and the Dominion. They were more than soldiers. They were protectors of the throne itself, sworn to defend the Emperor against any threat, alien or human. As the last echoes of the ceremonial march faded into the evening air, John allowed his mind to drift back over the years of grueling training that had brought him here. The sleepless nights spent memorizing tactics and strategies, the endless drills that pushed his body past its breaking point, the moments of doubt that had gnawed at him when he feared he might not be strong enough. The Academy was a place designed to break those who were unworthy, to weed out the weak, the complacent. And it had tried to break him more than once, but he had endured. His instructors had pushed him harder than the others, recognizing the potential within him even when John couldn't see it himself. They had forged him in fire, leaving no room for doubt, no room for weakness. And as he stood here now, with the future stretching out before him like a vast, uncharted starfield, John knew it had all been worth it. Every challenge, every failure, every scar, physical and mental, had been necessary. The academy had been his battlefield, and he had emerged victorious. Cadet Steele. The voice of General Carrick rang out, sharp and commanding. John snapped back to reality, his heart pounding in his chest as the imposing figure of the general approached. Carrick was a legend in his own right, a man whose name was synonymous with victory in campaigns that had spanned the stars. His face was hardened by years of warfare, his eyes sharp as a blade as they regarded John with cold scrutiny. The general carried with him a ceremonial blade, its polished surface gleaming in the dying light. "Step forward," Carrick ordered, his voice leaving no room for hesitation. Joan's boots echoed on the stone ground as he moved, each step heavy with the weight of his new responsibility. Every eye in the parade ground was on him, but he felt strangely calm. This was his moment. As he reached the general, he dropped to one knee, bowing his head in deference. The centuries-old tradition of knighthood and service still lingered within the Dominion, passed down from Earth's ancient past. "By the power vested in me by the Emperor of the Terran Dominion, I hereby name you Praetorian, defender of the throne, protector of the Emperor, and guardian of our people," General Carrick said, his voice reverberating across the field. He placed the blade in John's outstretched hands, and in that moment, John felt the gravity of his new position settle over him like a mantle. The Praetorian blade was more than a weapon. It was a symbol of everything he had worked for, everything he had sacrificed. Rising to his feet, John looked up toward the distant stars now beginning to emerge in the darkening sky. From here, standing on the soil of Earth, he could see them more clearly than ever before. Each star represented a world within the Dominion, each a place where his duty might one day call him. Yet the weight of his true responsibility lay on Earth, here in the capital, where the Emperor ruled. John Steele, Praetorian, stood ready to face whatever the future held. The path before him was uncertain, filled with unknowns and dangers lurking in the depths of space. But as the gleaming spires of the academy reflected the last light of the sun, John felt no fear. This was his destiny, and he would not fail. Next day, the dawn broke over the academy with a quiet, somber glow. Thin tendrils of mist curled around the stone walls and statues, making the ancient spires look ghostly in the early light. It was John Steele's final morning at the Terran Military Academy, and the realization hit him harder than he had anticipated. The place that had been his home for so many years, that had forged him into a warrior, was now just a memory in the rear view of his life. John stood on the steps of the Academy's grand entrance, the cold, damp air biting at his skin. His military-issued duffel bag rested at his feet, packed with everything he would need as he left for his new post. The world stretched out before him, vast and unknowable. He had always known this day would come, the day he would leave behind the Academy and step into the real world as a soldier of the Terran Dominion. But now that it was here, there was an odd sense of finality to it. The Academy was no longer his battlefield. The real battles lay ahead. The transport ship that would take him to his new destination hovered in the distance, sleek and angular, a dark silhouette against the rising sun. Beyond it, John could make out the faint outline of the horizon. Somewhere far to the south, across the scarred and ancient face of Earth, lay the capital city of the Dominion, Nova Lux, in the heart of what had once been called Africa. Nova Lux was a city unlike any other on Earth. Built atop the ruins of old civilizations, it was a towering metropolis of steel and glass, its sprawling structures rising from the red sands of the African continent like monoliths of a new era. It served not only as the political seat of the Dominion, but also as the military nerve center of the galaxy. For John, it was more than just a city. It was the place where he would officially take up his new post as a member of the Praetorian Guard. Praetorian, John muttered to himself, still trying to wrap his mind around the title. Even after the ceremony, after General Carrick had placed the ceremonial blade in his hand and spoken the words that would change his life, the reality of it had yet to fully sink in. He was no longer just a cadet, no longer simply John Steele. He was a Praetorian, a soldier sworn to protect the Emperor himself. The weight of that responsibility had begun to settle over him like a heavy cloak. As he stood there, staring out at the landscape he would soon leave behind, a voice interrupted his thoughts.
"You look like a man ready for battle."
John turned to see Lieutenant Kara Voss, one of his closest friends at the academy, standing a few steps behind him. Her dark hair was tied back, her uniform sharp and pristine, but there was a familiar smile on her lips. They had gone through training together, pushing each other through some of the academy's most grueling trials. She had been one of the few people who had kept him sane in those sleepless nights of preparation.
"Kara,"
John said, smiling as he reached down to pick up his duffel.
"I didn't think you'd be up this early. You think I'd let you leave without saying goodbye?"
She stepped forward and offered a mock salute.
"Praetorian, Steele."
John chuckled, shaking his head.
"Still getting used to that. You'll get used to it,"
Kara said.
"Besides, you've earned it. Nova Lux is going to be something else. You've seen the reports, right? That city makes even the academy look small."
John nodded. He had pored over every briefing he could find about Nova Lux. The city was a marvel of engineering, a testament to humanity's mastery over Earth. Rising out of the vast Sahara Desert, it was a city of gleaming towers and shimmering domes, its skyline stretching far beyond the limits of what the old world had ever imagined. But it wasn't just the city's size that intrigued him, it was the role he was about to play in it.
"I heard the Emperor himself will be there when you arrive,"
Kara said, her tone shifting to something more serious. John swallowed, the enormity of the statement washing over him. The Emperor, ruler of the entire Terran Dominion, commander of humanity's vast empire, would be waiting for him in Nova Lux. And John, as a member of the Praetorian Guard, would be standing by his side, sworn to protect him from any threat.
"I guess so,"
John replied, though his voice lacked the confidence he usually projected. Kara saw through it, of course. She always did. She stepped closer, placing a hand on his shoulder.
"You'll be fine, John. You've trained for this your whole life. If anyone can handle this, it's you."
John nodded, though the words felt hollow. How could anyone truly be ready for what awaited him in Nova Lux? The city was a political and military powder keg, with rival factions vying for influence and shadowy forces threatening the Emperor's rule. The Praetorian Guard was more than just a ceremonial unit. It was the last line of defense for the Emperor's life. A rumble sounded as the transport ship lowered its ramp, signaling the time for boarding. John and Kara exchanged one last look, the weight of their unspoken thoughts heavy in the air.
"I guess this is it,"
John said quietly. Kara gave him a grin. Through her eyes reflected the emotions she was trying to hide.
"For now, maybe. But who knows? We might end up on the same battlefield again. I hope so,"
John replied, gripping her forearm in a warrior's handshake. With one last glance at the academy that had shaped him, John slung his duffel over his shoulder and made his way toward the waiting transport. The engines hummed with quiet power as he ascended the ramp, his heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and anxiety. This was the beginning of a new chapter, a chapter where his life was no longer his own, but dedicated to the service of the Emperor and the survival of the Dominion. The transport lifted off the ground with a low, steady rumble, carrying John up into the sky. As he looked out the window, the academy grew smaller and smaller beneath him, fading into the patchwork of Earth's ancient terrain. Soon, the mountains and plains would give way to the vast deserts of the African continent, and there, on the shores of what was once the Nile River, Nova Lux would rise out of the sands like a fortress. As the transport broke through the last of the clouds, the landscape shifted. The rolling plains of Europe gave way to the parched, ochre-colored deserts of the Sahara. The change was drastic and immediate, a testament to how far humanity had come and how far it had yet to go. For centuries, Africa had been the birthplace of civilizations, and now it was the heart of the Dominion itself. Joan's thoughts raced as they approached the capital. He had heard stories about Nova Lux for as long as he could remember, about its towering skyscrapers, its bustling markets, and its labyrinthine streets where politics and power intertwined. The city was more than just the emperor's seat. It was the nerve center of the entire dominion. From here, the emperor ruled over hundreds of star systems, making decisions that would shape the future of humanity. But beneath the surface, danger lurked. Rebel factions, alien insurgents, and traitors within the Dominion all sought to undermine the Emperor's authority. John knew that his new life as a Praetorian would be filled with challenges, some he couldn't even begin to imagine. As the transport descended toward the gleaming spires of Nova Lux, John caught his first glimpse of the capital. The city sprawled across the horizon like a jewel set in the red sands of the Sahara. Towering skyscrapers reached into the sky, their glass facades reflecting the golden light of the desert sun. Hovercraft buzzed through the air, weaving between the colossal structures like insects around a hive. The Emperor's Palace, a gleaming citadel of white stone and glass, rose above the city's skyline, its spires reaching higher than any other building. It was both a symbol of the Emperor's power and a reminder of the weight of John's new responsibilities. As the transport settled onto the landing platform, John took a deep breath. The doors slid open with a hiss, and the warm, dry air of the desert capital hit him. He stepped out onto the platform, the enormity of the city spreading out before him. This was Nova Lux, the heart of the Terran Dominion. And this was his new life.